everyone, welcome back to Daska Discusses. Now, I've just watched the finale for Game of Thrones Season 8 and I thought, well, while it's fresh in my mind, I'm going to do a Season 8 review of Game of Thrones, the last season. Wow, let's do this. Now, where do you start? Look, I just finished watching the last episode of Season 8 and I'll get to what I thought of that, but first off, let's just start off. Been watching Game of Thrones for many years, since obviously the TV show started. Now, I never read the books, but I was a huge fan of when it started. I remember friends of mine had watched it and said, hey, you got to get into this show. That was like a couple of episodes in. So for many years, I was a big fan of Game of Thrones, waiting every year, waiting patiently, and seeing episodes and like remembering things like the Red Wedding, etc. And just being in awe of like the writing and how all these stories and all these characters came together, and it was just amazing. And get to season 7 and we wait, well, just about a year and a half more till like see season 8. And this is where this all begins, alright? Now with season 8, how can I put this? Episode 1 of season 8, I didn't mind it too much, okay? Obviously, you know, the first episodes of every season are gonna be there just for the build-up. Like, you know, you gotta obviously start off what's happening. We haven't seen what's been happening for a long time. We waited a long time. Heck, it was like between all that time, all this stuff had happened, and it's like, well, we're finally watching Game of Thrones. Episode 1, there was a build-up. You get what's going on at Winterfell, you get Daenerys meeting Sansa, etc. We see a bit of Cersei, all good, getting ready for the White Walkers to attack. Okay. Then came episode 2, where a lot of people were saying, oh, this episode, you know, it was boring, nothing happens, but I actually was a pretty big fan of episode 2. I liked how it was all done in Winterfell, and you were there with all these characters that you've known so well, and you know, they're sitting there, and I really liked the part with, you know, Jaime and Brienne, where he knights her, etc., and you're sitting there, and it's like old friends having a drink, getting ready for the ultimate, which is obviously the White Walkers and the Night King coming to attack. And I really didn't mind episode 2. Yeah, nothing much happens, but it was great dialogue. It was actually done really well, and it was a good build up to what, well, the whole world was waiting for, which was episode 3, The Long Night. Yeah. Well, look, I think you've heard it and you've probably watched many other reviewers about The Long Night, and we all know whatever happened with the compression rate with HBO, whatever happened, but I remember watching it on my screen. I've got a pretty big TV screen, lights off, sound up, and I couldn't really see much of what was going on. I thought there was something wrong with my TV. Now, a lot of people are like, oh, well, you didn't just adjust your settings. No. The thing is, guys, with, you know, I had my settings right, it was just blurry at times, okay? Not all the time, but there was some parts you couldn't actually see what was going on. You shouldn't have to be sitting there on a episode that's been filmed in low light, obviously, you know? You shouldn't have to sit there and have to adjust your TV unless you completely got it on, like, you know, the brightness and darkness, like all the way down. Different story. But I just felt that at times when there was so much happening on the screen with the dragons that there was some blotchiness, there was just some framing issues. So yeah, that was that one little gripe I had with episode 3. Then in episode 3, the whole thing with the Night King. Now, well, I'm not going to be like the typical people that have gone on and complained, but I will, because I actually wasn't happy. I wasn't happy how we've had this whole lead up to the Night King, the White Walkers, they've been walking for so long, it seems, and then we finally get to this part where Bran said, yeah, use me as bait, and the Night King rocks up, and we've got the ice dragon and all this stuff's all happened, and Jon can't get there, and then the Night King walks up to Bran, and I was thinking, yes, they're gonna say something, maybe Bran's gonna like walk into something and like speak to him, I don't know, I was waiting for something, and we got it. We got Arya appearing out of thin air and, well, grabbing the Night King grabs her, she drops her Valyrian steel blade, stabs him, and the Night King's dead, and they all just shatter like ice cubes on a kitchen counter. And I'm like, wow, okay, that's it for the Night King and the White Walkers? Done? And you can see the uproar that happened after that. We all know what happened on the internet. We all know how everyone was really, really angry with episode 3. Like I was saying, like I said, I wasn't impressed with how they got rid of the Night King, but if you think about it, how else were they meant to get rid of him? There are many ways to get rid of it. Should it have been Arya? Should it have been Jon Snow? You know, a Jon Snow, Night King sword battle would have been pretty awesome as well. I think Daenerys trying to burn him with the dragonfire was really cool, how he just kept going, but the Dothraki army just disappearing, that was a really good shot, but again, moving on from the season, they just kind of like reappear. So there was a lot of gaps that came from this episode. Episode 4 sees, you know, the end of the battle, and we've got, you know, all our characters burning off all the dead. Now we had Sir Jorah Mormont who died. We've got Lady Mormont who died as well, and a few others that were, you know, some sub characters you could say. And that was a really good touch. You can see them, you know, they're all putting them down and they're all like burning them. Obviously, you know, their funerals, you could say. Then you've got Daenerys flying into King's Landing, or in the bay there, and then one of her dragons gets shot by Euron, which, again, you know, 1, 2, 3 of those big scorpion bolts pulls it down, and obviously, you know, one of Daenerys' dragons dies. And then we've got this whole standoff outside King's Landing about what's going to happen, and then Qyburn comes out and says, you know, surrender, and then, well, like, we won't surrender, and then Miss Sunday is there, and Cersei kind of like, well, yeah, executes her in front of Daenerys. So that was a pretty epic way to end that episode, okay? Now, this is where it gets a bit sketchy in terms of pacing and how this season worked out for me personally. It's just that, I know everyone said this, but I kind of agree. It's just that episodes 1 to 4, I just felt that Jon Snow, I mean, he was in it, you know, we found out about, I mean, he told his secret to Sansa in episode 4 as well, about him being Aegon Targaryen and all that, and it just like, you know, he couldn't keep his secret, and then Tyrion finds out, and then Varys finds out. There was just a lot of things that it just feels rushed, and you can tell on the writing, okay? Now, episode 4 just had that for me. It was just like, okay, well, they behead her, yep, all sweet, alright, that's not good. And then we lead it on to episode 5, The Bells. And wowee, The Bells. Let me say about this episode, again, a big uproar about what happened in this. Now, obviously, if you're watching this, there's major spoilers, duh. But, The Bells episode, I don't know how to put this, but I'm just going to put it bluntly, is that yes, you can justify what Daenerys did, how she basically went all mad queen and burnt everyone in King's Landing, after she kept saying repeatedly in seasons that she's not her father, you know, she's a breaker of chains, she protects the innocent, all that stuff. Now, with Cersei killing Missandei and killing one of her dragons, is that enough for Daenerys to go on a major, like, killing spree, genocide of a whole city? We're talking like everyone burns. Again, her character arc, I just think, went from like whoever Daenerys was, who we grew to know and love, a lot of people did love her, I didn't mind her, and then just to see her do that, it was out of character. It's my opinion, guys, this is a discussion, I'm just saying. It just basically was way too quick of a turn to just burn the whole city down, Cersei sitting there watching. Now, from there, you get a lot of the episodes just people dying, like non-stop, just burning. You got Jon Snow who's fighting and then doesn't want to fight because, you know, he's trying to pull back his troops. You got Grey Worm who goes on a bloodlust killing spree. And you've got Arya and the Hound, which was interesting, and then when they finally get to the Red Keep and Arya's there, she's had Cersei on her list for so long, and the Hound's like, no, go, you know, you'll die if you come up with me, don't be like me. And she kind of like says, you know, Sandor, thank you, and then walks. Now, I really like that as she addressed him like that, but, you know, if we're gonna have like character development and someone's character like Arya who's had this list and repeating it so long, for her to just turn back and walk away, it just seemed really fake, and didn't really make sense to me personally. And then to have her at King's Landing, well, we all know why, and it's well known through watching the making of the episode as well, is that we needed to see a point of view of someone in King's Landing during all this during this massacre, and that's what they did. They basically had Arya go into the King's Landing just so she can leave and give us that perspective, which is fair enough, I guess, but again. And that leads me to the Clegane to the Clegane Ball between the Mountain and the Hound, which, again, would George R. R. Martin have had this in his books? Who knows, but was this fan service? Maybe it was. I don't care. I thought it was done really well. I just think the editing between that and Arya got a bit jarring at times. I think it would have been awesome if they just kept it just that fight. Yes, I know it would have been ridiculous. You know, maybe you're thinking, oh, you can't just have that. But I reckon a good 3-4 minute unbroken edited fight would have been awesome. I really like the way, I think I called it even before it happened. I go, I betcha the Hound and the Mountain are going to die together somehow, and it happened like that. And then for it to end like it did with episode 5, where everything's in ashes, and then that white horse, yeah, that biblical reference, I get it, you know, but with what's happened so far, I'm not going to sit there and like try and think, oh yeah, you know, death rides the pale horse. It's just like, I was pretty disappointed by the end of season 5, and I'm not saying I've got major hatred for the whole season up until this point. I remember up until season 5, I'm just like, what's going on with this season? It's rushed. It seems rushed. Jon Snow is like a footnote in this season so far. What's going to happen? And I, you know, like everyone thought, well, obviously Arya is going to kill Daenerys. You know, that's what we were thinking at the end of season 5. The other little point about episode 5 which really annoyed me was the way Cersei went out, and Jaime's character arc after being with Brienne and turning his back on Cersei, goes to Winterfell, is with Brienne, knights her, and then all of a sudden just turns around and goes back to King's Landing. Now you could say, well, that's why, because he always loved her, and you know, that whole line about how he wanted to be with the person that he loved, etc. I get that as well, but for Cersei, such a key villain in the show, to go down like that, some people say, oh, it's symbolic, you know, that the Red Keep collapsed on her, you know, it's like whatever she built, you know, collapsed on top of her with her lover, Jaime. I get that as well. It's just that when I did watch episode 5 the first time, I'm like, really? We're going to get rid of someone this big in this show like that? But is that what the, you know, the writers are going for? They're there to shock the audience? Well, they kind of have by doing that. Not in so much as like, oh, I can't believe Cersei's dead, but it's like, I can't believe Cersei died like that. And that leads me to episode 6, the finale, which I literally just finished watching about, I don't know, half an hour ago. Well, the finale, look, we all knew that, well, we didn't all know, but I had a feeling that Daenerys was going to meet her maker somehow, okay? How so? Well, the first 10-15 minutes, we get this slow kind of build-up. Jon Snow, you know, he's really not happy about what's happened. Tyrion's not happy about what's happened, and they're taken prisoner, sorry. And then Jon Snow goes to confront Daenerys, and he's like, you know, this is not what I want. And then she's like, this is what we always wanted. You know, do this with me. And then they kiss, and then boom, yeah, the whole knife in the heart, and Daenerys is dead. I'm like, whoa, okay, well, that was very interesting. I always thought they're going to pull out Arya and she's going to do it because of the prophecy of brown eyes, blue eyes, green eyes thing, whatever. Glad they didn't do that. Glad that it was Jon Snow in a way to do it. He is the rightful heir. And then you've got Drogon who goes ballistic and burns down the Iron Throne. I thought that was really cool and really symbolic as well. Then it's kind of like a bit of a transition happens, a bit of a time shift where cuts to black, and then you got Tyrion comes out, and there's all the Lords of Westeros are around. You've got Sansa, Arya, that kid from the Moon Door, Aaron, Tully, you've got Sam there, you've got Davos. They're all sitting there having a discussion about what's going to happen with Jon Snow, and Grey Worm, no offense, I know his wife, no, his girlfriend and his queen have died, and he's pretty angry about what's happened, but his character as well is obviously changed, but obviously that's part of the show, you know, you can't have him happy about what's happened. Then they're like, oh, who's going to be the rightful king? And then Tyrion speaks up and says, I think it should be, you know, the person who has seen all the wars and our memories and etc., and goes on a bit of a speech like that, and it turns around and says Bran the Builder, something like that, and it's Bran. Now Sansa says, okay, cool, well, I still want the North to be an independent area. Everyone else says I, and Bran becomes the king of the Six Kingdoms. Now a lot of people that I've seen on the net, and you know, you go on social media and you see it, people are really underwhelmed with this episode, and they're like, what the hell ending was that? We waited this long for that? As the episode keeps going, we find out that Jon Snow, obviously because Bran is the king now, and he can't show any kind of like bias towards what happens to Jon Snow because he did kill Daenerys, and the Greyjoys were, Yara Greyjoy was following Daenerys as well, that obviously Jon Snow has to pay for his crimes, and Bran sends him back to the Night's Watch, which was really interesting. He makes Tyrion the Hand. Arya decides to travel like Columbus and like, no, I'm gonna go west of the map where there's no map. Sansa becomes Queen of the North, and you've got this whole kind of parallel editing sequence at the end between Jon, Arya and Sansa showing their 3 journeys, okay? Now, what I really liked about it was obviously Arya was never going to stick around. She was always going to do something adventurous. Sansa always wanted to be the Queen of the North. And then you've got Jon, who goes back to beyond the wall, you could say. He's got his old costume on and he meets up with Tormund. And then finally, he gets the pat old ghost, which was really a really good touch. Now, the problem that people on social media and the internet are having now is that, what about Jon and the prophecies? What about him being a Targaryen and him being the rightful heir? What about all this other stuff that's happened? What about all this lead up to this season and it all ends like this? I understand that. I get it, Jon should have been the king, but he didn't want it. That's the thing. So how are the writers, with what's happened so far in this season, yes, they've had a bit of a dog's breakfast with what they've done and they've rushed through it. If you didn't like the last episode, I fully understand that, but think about it like this. What else were they meant to do with what they had? Okay, make Jon the king, then what about the Unsullied and all those guys? What, have another battle between the Northerners and the Unsullied? It just wasn't going to work. You can't have another battle after a battle. So the way they did it was this whole thing about Bran being the king, and that there is no blood kind of king. It's like we choose who the king is, kind of like a democracy, okay? I really like that kind of touch, okay? Then at the end, when you've got Tyrion with everyone sitting there, Bronn and Sam and Davos sitting there discussing things like, on the table, the Master of Coin, this and that, and Sam brings out the Song of Fire and Ice, the name of the series as well, which is really cool. I thought that was a good touch. And then it cuts back to Jon beyond the wall, out on his horse, with his old costume, the fur and the same kind of hairstyle that he had. Sansa being the Queen of the North, and then Arya, and then Bran, obviously the king. I think Bran would be a good king, obviously, if this was real life or whatever. But there's a lot of flack, and obviously already on IMDb, this episode has been rated really poorly. I don't really rate this episode as poorly as other ones, and a lot of people saying it's underwhelming. I just think that with what they had, with what Jon had to do, he killed Daenerys, he had to pay for his crimes. Now, him going back to the Night's Watch kind of doesn't make sense to me, because there's nothing to watch. There's no more Night Walkers. Not Night Walkers, there's no more White Walkers, okay? So he's gonna go protect the wall. That kind of didn't make sense to me. That was the only gripe I had, and the whole fact that the whole kind of series was not built upon the whole thing on Jon Snow, but a lot of it was, all these flashbacks and all these things about him being a Targaryen, etc. And his job was to kill Daenerys, but that's what Bran said. He goes, my job was to be here. He knew what was going to happen. He knew he had to be there. Everyone had some sort of role to play, and this is the role they had to play. A lot of people aren't going to agree with it, and a lot of people are going to be really annoyed with it, but I put it like this. This was not no Dexter ending. Now, Dexter, if you ever watched it, that last episode was a total disaster. This wasn't a total disaster. It was kind of like someone just grabbing a whole bunch of different ingredients and chucking it into a NutriBullet, and then just pressing blend and blending it all up, pouring it out and saying, here you go, here's your last season. Meaning that, yes, there were some good bits, it tasted okay at times, but then when it gets to the end of the NutriBullet that you're drinking and it's all clumpy, that's all the bad parts, and that's all the gaps in the show. That's what I reckon anyway. So for this season 8, I mean, look, some real interesting parts, some real hits and some major misses. And if you had to rate this out of 10 for this season, I mean, I'm still getting over what happened in the finale. But if you had to rate it all, I think you'd have to just literally say for me, I give this season probably a 6.5, max 7 out of 10. More so probably a 6.5 out of 10. The last episode itself, I would give that a 7 out of 10. A lot of people don't agree with me, but I thought that there is really no other way to, there's other ways to go about it, but the only way to keep, I guess, structure of what they've been doing in this season without going too crazy and having another battle, that was the only thing they could do. Jon didn't die, Tyrion didn't die, there were new roles to be filled, and it was filled. And as always guys, look, let me know what you thought of Season 8 in the comments, leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and of course subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys on the next episode of Daska Discusses. Boom!